to Roundtables Live. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the St. Lawrence Hall for providing us with this venue and for helping to promote a social educational initiative. My name is Patrick, and I'll be your host and the moderator for the panel discussion today. And as well, you guys should know that we're broadcasting this event live on the internet, so we have all kinds of people joining us from all over the world. And Katie over here is going to let us know exactly who's with us right now.
Hello everybody, we're seeing active participation online so far and huge support. We have many participants from actually all over the world with us tonight. Among them are New York, we're seeing Chicago, New Mexico, St. Louis, New Jersey, Australia. Europe is with us, online connections from Portugal, Norway, Iceland. Iceland folks say hello. Italy, Australia, and Russia so far, and this is just the beginning.
Outstanding, thanks very much. So, for those of you who are not familiar, the goal behind Roundtables Live is twofold. On the one level, we wish to discuss topics that are relevant and that affect us all. And on another level, we aim to create a discussion platform that will encourage and allow participants to voice their opinions in an environment that encourages warmth, equality, and connection. So basically we'll begin with a panel discussion with my panel here, who will introduce momentarily. This will include some input from you guys, our audience, and after this point we'll move into individual tables and we'll have discussions at every single table, so you're all participants, and thank you all for coming. So tonight's panel, starting on my far right, is Toyin Coker. She is the founder and director of the Permaculture Project GTA, and is the creator and producer of the conferences, events, gatherings, and happenings of the TPP GTA. Toyin is a natural mentor, gardener, community builder, and animator with a huge heart and a strong mind. Toyin believes that permaculture is a liveity and is sharing her views and thoughts with the Hub to evolve the work that they are doing day in and day out. Next to her is Bianca Sanchez, who is an associate partner at the Ryerson University for Community Organizing and Development. Bianca was born in Mexico City, and started her career by studying travel and hospitality, and worked in the industry all over the world, including London, New York City, New Orleans, Montreal, and Toronto. Since then, Bianca has started organizing businesses that aim to aid students and caregivers at their management skills. Most recently, her new business, Canada Single Mothers Network and Services, provides emotional guidance and support for business education for single mothers, youth, and other marginalized communities to become owners, managers, and/or self-employed and own their own business. Next to Bianca is Jacob Cleary-Moreland, who is with Occupy Gardens Toronto. Jacob was born in Toronto and raised on a farm near Orillia. He studies sociology and philosophy at the University of Toronto. Jacob is a writer, musician, gardener, and full-time community builder. A facilitator of Occupy Gardens, he's a community guerrilla gardening extremist and believes growing good free food together is the solution to all of the world's problems. Next to me on my left is Vance Gilbert with the Jarvis George Housing Cooperative Incorporated. Vance Gilbert is an American-born Canadian, was raised primarily in Canada, had a brief experience in the US Air Force, his practical work experience in the housing industry as a leasing consultant. He is the assistant manager and also he worked as an assistant manager and a manager in a real estate and investment trust property management company. He's involved in the Jarvis George Housing Co-op since 2007 and as a member of the membership committee, and more recently as vice president for the board of directors. He has extensive training and experience in the housing service industry and can easily identify critical issues and needs experienced by people looking for good homes. Next to him is our mutual responsibility representative, Julian Edwards. Julian worked for many years in the area of hospitality management and lived in many countries, including the US, UK, Chile, and Australia. Since moving to Canada, he's been helping Mutual Responsibility in the realm of education through the organization and facilitation of various educational initiatives and programs. Next to Julian is Jamie. Jamie is a University of Toronto alumnus and technical writer in Toronto with a perspective similar to that of a boomer who's the sole parent of 2 primary school-aged girls. He's very active in the online community, sharing his strong political and intellectual views throughout the viral world. So thank you all for being part of our panel today. So today's event is based around the topic of why our basic needs are getting out of reach. As the world globalizes and as technology advances, you would think that we as a society would begin to be able to utilize and distribute our resources more efficiently, hence lowering our costs. But what we see happening is actually the exact opposite. In the last 30 years, the average income in Canada has remained identical. Since 1980, it has not risen essentially at all. And the burdens that this economic platform carries have risen dramatically. In that same 30-year period, houses have risen by 400%. And in Toronto, we live in the second most expensive market in the country. And this isn't the only challenge. As well, in July, Statistics Canada released a report that projects that next year's food prices will rise about 4.5%. This is double last year's increase. So groups such as families, students, and seniors who live on fixed incomes are going to start to experience decreases in their living standards and disposable incomes, and possibly they could face a lifetime of economic austerity. The middle class that I'm mentioning is also shrinking. In between falling wages of the lower 20% and rising wages in the upper 20%, we find a greater and greater number of people at the bottom who can't afford to pay and produce their basic necessities. In fact, in Ontario, more than 1.7 million people live below the poverty line. This is going to increasingly put more pressure on our social, health, and government systems. These rising costs of living, this economic disparity, and the budget cuts that we're all starting to see are affecting us. They're affecting everyone. Unusual weather conditions are affecting crops around the world, creating spikes in our food prices, and speculation and corruption in the financial markets is starting to pose questions about the stability of our future. The real question is, will the systems that are in place today be able to support us in the future? So today's roundtable discussion is going to focus on these issues, and we would like to hear all of your opinions, and we'd like to come together and formulate possible solutions, but from a more global and integrative standpoint. We got a big fan? We want to focus on what needs to be implemented in order to bring fulfillment and stability to our lives, both as individuals and as a society. We want everybody to share their opinion and carefully listen to the opinions of others. I hope you'll enjoy our event. So basically, I'm just going to jump right into to our panelist questions, and we'll start with Toyin.
Hello? Perfect.
You with us?
I am.
Excellent. So, Toyin, as the founder and the creator of the TPP GTA, I understand that your work with the Permaculture Project exposes you to current trends in environmental practices.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, how does our treatment of the natural environment lead to the rising costs of basic needs?
Okay. Actually, as I see it, it's actually our view and our value system with the resources. I find that a lot of the shift comes from really looking at resources more in a relationship based way instead of a resource-based way. And I find that things are becoming increasingly out of touch because our value system is very skewed, and it's only allowed to perpetuate in that cycle because we're watching, kind of a saturation of values we don't subscribe to, losing our voices more and more. As much as we feel that we represent a large majority of conscious individuals on the ground, until a grassroots organization or an ideal reaches a high production level or attains that level of what would be deemed high production, it's not really given the space freely to do things. And so I find that those who could bring resources closer, or those who could make resources even more identified by speaking in a language more common to the ground, aren't given the room to provide those services. So I find the value system is really the piece that I pinpoint when I'm looking at the relationships or the resource question. Why are these values so against what I need as a human being in order to live? Why don't I find them outside in my community? And when I do find them, how much out of my way have I had to go to get it?
Thank you. Also, based on your experience and what you see happening, there's a lot of trends. So what kind of things do you see happening? What do you expect to happen if these trends continue?
I really see, because there's a lot of trends on the ground, even with the sustainable agriculture or organic agriculture, there's still the trend to take almost the surface and just apply. So whatever knowledge was gained in the last year, it's not really all of it that's applied to the following practice. It's kind of skimming the surface. And I see that trend more and more when I sit down with landscapers or educators or teachers, that they're really looking for what will just get us by. How do we satisfy this most recent trend in the green movement? How do we just get our youth exposed to the bare minimum? How can I squeeze this into my curriculum? And if it continues, what I'm noticing is our youth are at a perfect place, varying in age, to really absorb things. They're seeing the mixed messages in the media and they're ready to make the shift, but because it's not readily available in their schools or their environments, it's really easy for them to slip into a more complacent, a more just accepting what they see, very mainstream understanding of things without going into any critical. And so I'm seeing that trend more and more, and really trying to get in and before that trend takes over, permeates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up I've got Bianca. Bianca, as somebody who endorses community values, why is working together and collaborating so important in resolving the issues such as the rising cost of our basic needs?
Based in my personal experience, I'm in my late 50s, and 5 years ago I went back to college full-time, and I did not learn as much as I did after I finished college, and I made it my life to learn and to understand what's happening around me, because I have my son who is only 18 years old. So my son inspired me to dig in as far as I can go. So this is not to serve anybody else but the next generation, because my son will be part of it. And for that reason, the conclusion I got, and many people agree with me because I have read other books after I have written my material, is that when we find in our cities two people living together with or without children, or single people living with or without children, we are going against our human principle. We were never meant to live isolated from others, and by that I mean that we should have an extended family, a group that we belong to on a regular basis, not just being with family or friends when there is a family gathering or annual festivities. We should always be living and working with others who can help us accomplish the daily routines and also help us make important decisions in our life. When we fail to do so, we fabricate a whole new texture of our social sphere that can be interpreted as a permanent challenge. I experienced that, how to live independently from others and at the same time be able to succeed in our personal and professional life. That is the expectation is given in this society, and that is wrong. Can I keep talking? Or you want me to ask?
Go right ahead.
No wonder how many of us feel that we are living in a survival mode, not in a living mode. We are in pain. For many of us, we live under daily stress, daily worries, daily challenges without people around us that we can trust to give us important advice and support when we need it the most. I had to write it because I get very emotional. This is personal. For individuals who feel that they could benefit from mentorship, from experienced and successful individuals and families that can inspire the community that does not have a family, from professionals, older adults who are successful, and also learn from single parents. Single parents can give you so many lessons. Children can give us so many lessons. I have to share this with you. At my age, I went back to babysit my girlfriend who had a 1- and 3-year-old. And for the first time, I realized this is the problem that we have in our society. We are not in touch with children. And by that I mean bonding with them. When I was able to bond after a few months with a 1-year-old, I realized this is the key. For youth and people who live isolated and who get sick, when you give yourself the opportunity to bond with the next generation, a whole new world opens to you. Inspiration, energy, that is the key. We are disconnected. We do not allow ourselves to be in touch with children. Had it not been because my girlfriend asked me to go, I would have missed that experience. And now I'm going in YouTube to tell this story and many others that I can wait to start, hopefully in a couple of weeks. And I can keep talking, but I prefer somebody else to talk.
Thank you, Bianca. Okay, Jacob, your organization, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Let me stop you there, Patrick.
Your community.
No, let me stop you there, Patrick.
Okay.
It's a community. It's not mine. It was there before I came, and it'll be there after I leave.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Okay. So, everybody is a member. Everybody's participation is valued and welcomed. Every contribution is also valued. Occupy Gardens, while it is a project I'm involved with many different projects. I've collaborated with a few of these people sitting at the table, people sitting in the audience, and it goes by many different names, and it doesn't really matter what you call it. The purpose of calling it Occupy Gardens was to use the meme of Occupy while it was hot to connect with other people in other cities who are feeling the same way. And so simply by creating a Facebook page, Occupy Gardens, people think all of a sudden there's an organization. But really it was just a means of connecting with people who felt the same way. And so through that I was able to connect with people in cities across the world because other people started Occupy Gardens pages, and we could easily search for one another to find each other, and so that we could communicate and start collaborating.
So this happened out of a need, as everything does. Nothing exists without any reason. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you think there's a need for organizations such as yours?
Let me quickly go back to the last question. The unique thing about what we were doing there, the Occupy Gardens was a bridging of two divergent movements, the food movement and the Occupy movement. So by connecting the two ideas of Occupy and Gardens, we were connecting two distinct communities that weren't in dialogue and conversation. In doing that, we were able to create something of a higher synthesis between the two. And so from that came the idea of planting guerrilla gardens or food gardens without permission in high-profile public spaces. And then using that garden as a means of raising awareness and bringing people together and facilitating discussion and action towards many different issues. And so that was the unique thing about that.
Okay, so lots of people here, we all have refrigerators. Most of us probably go to the grocery store and buy our food. Why do we need this movement?
So a lot of people here might go to the grocery stores and buy their food. The topic of the evening was why our basic needs are getting out of reach. And if you all look at the table, you'll see that all of our basic needs are now in reach. There are beans representing food, there's water, there's other humans, community, and if we were to stand on each other's shoulders, we would be able to touch the roof. Shelter. And so a lot of people, the reason that we need to be growing our own food and we need to be growing it with each other for free is because we have more than enough food on this planet that's produced. We have an abundance, and we pay billions of dollars to literally throw good food into the trash. So it's not a matter of, it's a matter of distribution, it's a matter of the way in which we exchange with one another or not exchange with one another, and it's the way in which we essentially relate to each other and relate to the planet. And so the gardens provide an opportunity for people to build genuine human relationships with their natural environment, which we depend on. And then from these communities, we're able to realize our own power to affect change by getting the confidence and the skills and the resources and the community to support us in reaching our goals. And so, why go to the grocery stores? Grocery stores are a new invention, coming about only in the last few decades, really, or in the last century. People used to grow food in community, and people used to share it at their homes and in the markets and in everywhere else, because food was growing everywhere. And so by having food growing all over the city, everywhere becomes a space where people can share and they can engage in life.
Thanks, Jacob. Next up, I've got Vance to my left here. So I just wanted to know, based on your experience in the housing industry, what kind of challenges do you find people going through in terms of finding a home and providing shelter for themselves? Like I mentioned earlier, there's a growing number of people who can't even put a roof over their heads. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of these challenges that these people are going through?
Well, one of the biggest problems that a lot of people are focused on, when I went to the annual general members meeting for the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, one of the biggest issues that they had tabled was a discussion on how to solve some of the problems that the aging population has to face. They've got a reduced income as soon as they retire, and they're also needing to have affordable housing that respects them. They're constantly running into a burning bridge of corporations only interested in making a profit. They don't want their customers to be happy. They don't want their customers to be satisfied with the product. They basically just want to have a profit, because that's the bottom line that a lot of corporations look at whenever they talk to their shareholders, is how much money have I got back from the customers after you've invested your money as a stockholder. The biggest issue is that when the aging population retires and has their income reduced, they have less buying power just because they retired. The other issue is that when mortgage rates force a lot of people to have more of their rent going towards interest that the banks have put on the property that the houses are built on, the biggest issue is that it then becomes harder for the housing industry to keep the buildings in repair. That's one of the critical issues that the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada was looking at, with discussions on how to maintain sustainable housing for people who are in need. So when you ask one of the most important things that our community faces is finding affordable housing that respects people, that is also sustainable. We don't need corporations going ahead and developing property that used to be a wildland just so that someone can move into a box that falls apart in 20 years. What we need to do is we need to find sustainable housing that provides respect not only to the community but to the environment as well.
Excellent, thank you. Julian, we've looked at issues from a few different standpoints, socially, we looked at a bit of the environment, we looked at some food issues, some housing issues. This makes it pretty clear that we've got some issues. Our costs are getting, like I said, like the topic says, they're getting out of reach. We have more than enough to go around. How is it that, that this is happening? So as a representative of mutual responsibility, we have a goal. We've done research about this goal. How do you see education and social values coming into play with regards to these challenges? And what do you think will be the engine of change that we need?
It's great to be here, and basically let me start by saying that you've just mentioned two words, education and values. And in my experience, whenever we say these words, I see that people start yawning and start falling asleep. So this is obviously because we assume that it's to do with school or university or church or something like this, but this is not the education or the values that mutual responsibility is talking about. So I want to talk a little bit about that and how this relates to the fact that our basic needs are getting out of reach. Now, I'm a family man, and I know what it means to worry, since the future looks so uncertain to us. And I can't just pack my bags and go somewhere else, because this is not a local problem. This is a global issue that's happening all over the world. It's almost like all the systems and all the institutions that humanity ever built to make our life more comfortable, to stabilize us, and to give us peace of mind, they're all in a state of crisis. They are all crumbling. And I ask myself, why? What is going on? Now, the answer to this question is the same answer that scientists, experts, researchers, people like you, people like me, are all together, all over the world, starting to voice. Namely, that we are all interconnected today and interdependent. We exist in a closed system where the future of everyone in this room and everyone on the planet depends on the relationships between us, on the correct relationships between us. Now, if you don't think that you are interdependent, I want to urge everyone in this room now to just take a moment and think about what you're wearing. Think about the clothes that you're wearing. Think about what you had for breakfast. Think about the thousands of people and the dozens of countries that were involved in getting these things to you. If you start extrapolating, it's actually mind-boggling to think about how many people are involved just to get those things to you. Now, this is a reality. The problem is that our institutions and our systems have not evolved to reflect this change and still act in the same egoistic and profit-driven ways. So we have this wonderful new world, this interconnected world with so much potential, but we are holding on to old, obsolete, and contrary ways that basically destabilize the whole system. So we have two vying systems, and this is the crisis. We need to move on. This is where education comes in. The education that mutual responsibility talks about is that we all need to help each other understand this new reality as quickly as possible so that we can start building systems that do reflect this reality. We can do this by disseminating this really simple idea that we're all one, that we are connected today, that we are mutually responsible for each other, we're in a closed system, and do it through the internet, do it through roundtable sessions like today, do it through written dissemination or word of mouth, any means, because this dissemination or this education is what is going to get the whole process started so we can start moving to create these new systems. Now, mutual responsibility is not an idealistic organization. We actually understand that many of the systems that now are in crisis could crumble completely before we build new ones. And basically, we've all heard the research, you know, how people are saying that the days of unending credit may be over, that we could wake up tomorrow and our money will be worthless. So, in view of this, we're going through a process, and in this process, there may be a vacuum, there may be a time where we may not be able to build new systems. So we also say that with education, we need to bring something that's called mutual support systems, or a change in values. What are mutual support systems? What is this change in values that needs to come? What I'm talking about here is families, friends, neighbors, communities, all waking up, all coming together in unity to help each other provide for our basic necessities, which are food, home, health, childcare, transportation, and any other need that we deem necessary. Now, examples of these support systems. How about a community organizing collective transportation? A community organizing buying bulk food and designating a common kitchen? How about families getting together and organizing childcare? This is what I'm talking about. These are support systems that we need to start thinking about. Why? Because this is a grassroots change. Support is probably not going to fall from the skies, guys. We need to start taking responsibility. Now, humanity has never been here before. But we have a wonderful opportunity, a golden opportunity, to start to value each other, not for what we can buy or for what we have, but for who we are and how we relate to each other. And if we're able to invest in these relationships, I honestly see that our future is much brighter than what we have today. And the fact that we're all here together tonight is a huge step towards ensuring that we will always have these basic needs. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you.
Jamie, you're also a father, as Julian recently became. So, what kind of concerns do you have as a father about the world that your daughters are going to grow into? Do you feel that the systems in place are supportive enough to provide them with the tools and resources that they need to lead a successful and meaningful life?
Yes. However, I don't think they're going to be recognizable by the time the girls are, I have 2 daughters, are out of the house, out of my sphere of influence, my controlling influence as a dad. I'm not very fearful. I am very hopeful that I'm helping my children by being as clear as I can about about being as clear as I can about the picture. It's very important to let children know as many details as possible when they're curious. And as somebody mentioned earlier, there are lots of reasons for the children to be curious. So I try to lay it on the line, and I think my daughters are terrific in picking up and, challenging me right back. Did I answer your question, Patrick?
Yes, you did. Very well. Thank you. So at this point, we're going to use my big guy over here, Ernest. He's going to come around with a mic, and we're going to get some feedback and some questions from you, our audience. And we're basically going to take in all of the questions at once. And then I'm going to kind of formulate some questions for our panelists right now.
My question to Julian. Julian, can you describe a little bit wider what your ideas are? To live together, have one kitchen in a community, raise kids and so on, so on. For me it looks like, reminds me of a kibbutz system in Israel.
Maybe you shouldn't have started with the statement that given all the advances in technology, we have to wonder why things are getting out of reach, because that makes it sound like the technology should have made things better, and therefore takes technology out of the equation as to why things are getting worse. And then we spend the rest of our time talking about our social structures. Maybe our social structures are actually working better than we think they are, and technology is working a lot worse than we think it is.
Thank you.
My name's Toby, and I've been to some protests. The first one being amalgamation. When I was 6, my mom took me, and I got to see a lot of nice people making things. I was wondering if, and my question is, did amalgamation affect things so harshly that we still have so many problems on top of the market draw of all the economy, all the money that we're spending on internet technologies?
Regarding the panel talking about food and the growing population, and it is growing. Not growing faster than what the food situation. Yes, it's nice to have, like, say, community gardens, etc. The one I know that I send tiny amounts to is food share right here in Toronto. I guess there's a lot of others just like it. However, I think that the food situation is a finite situation, and the human population is infinite, and it's going to get worse. Climate change, which has been brought upon certain elements of the big business, etc., is not helping. It's making a thing worse. So maybe we can just sort of keep things at bay by, say, community gardens, people growing in their own backyards, farmers markets like at Nathan Phillips Square today and tomorrow afternoon at noon hour, and there's other farmers markets across the city. And this, like I say, gets local food, etc. However, we have winter times when that's not possible, and I guess we have to import a lot of stuff, or otherwise don't bother about oranges and grapefruit, etc., etc. Just what can be grown in greenhouses and so on. Until a situation, and this is fantasy, turns around where the population is a finite situation and food is infinite, then this world has a better chance. But there's a lot of ideologies, greed, etc., etc., that's fighting against us and has been since the dawn of time. And these are egos, like I say, that have to be overcome, and like I say, that is almost like science fiction in a sense. Thanks for listening to me, and I guess that's rather foolish in some ways and controversial. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sonny Young, occupier. The question is for Bianca. Would socialism be a viable alternative to the consumerism of capitalism? And if we have a revolution for change, would it necessarily have to be international if we're to meet the needs of the people in distributing the wealth and the food that is created? Like, is affordable housing and fair trade viable things we can think of on an international level? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, panelists, for all your insight. I'm an Aboriginal woman. I'm Cree from the prairies, and I'd like to say thank you for having this roundtable discussion. I'd like to make a comment and something referring to what Julian has pointed out. And communal living is not a new concept. It has been around since the dawn of time. I think that what we've shifted away from is this conditioning in our society that we are profit-driven. Corporations have us brainwashed into thinking that we have to live the way that they're dictating us how to live. So I think that educating each other on how to live communally is not far out of our reach, and that's something that we could learn to do amongst each other, and it's been done in the Aboriginal community. Our community survived through tough times because we lived communally, we exchanged, we grew food, we knew how to, sustain ourselves, and that's the kind of thinking we have to get back to, how we do it communally within our areas and our groups. And that, I think, is going to be another value change for us, because we have to move away from what society has dictated to us how we should live. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Corrie Galloway, and I live in a co-op too, so I know a little bit about communal living. And it's very hard for people who have been educated and trained to live on a very individual level to learn to share. But on a level, my daughter is convinced that all the golf clubs that they're building are all going to be turned into organic farms. So there's a positive note for you. But this is for Vance. I guess I've been working on affordable housing, it feels like forever. And the politicians know the problem, but there's no political will. And now with the OMB, there's no... the developers just go to the OMB and then they build their condos, and so it feels kind of, I hate to say it, hopeless to me, because I've just been, and it's right across the board. It's not against any ageism or ethnicity or mental illness. There's just going to be a tsunami coming. So Vance, I don't know if you have any solutions, but I'm looking to you. Thanks.
We'll take one more, and then we're going to move to the internet.
I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to have to stay sitting. I have this little sweetheart here, Toyin's son. I am here to represent an organization called Transition Toronto, a chapter of Transition Network. And pretty much everything that people have shared with us, both at the front and in the audience, is a reflection of the activity that we're doing globally. We have 900 initiatives and 1,800 member organizations around the world. If you haven't heard of us, look us up, Transition Toronto or Transition Network. And basically we build resilience in communities by focusing on helping people grow their own food, build their own homes, fix their own appliances, and look towards a future with much less energy. We're actually offering a theater workshop in October on the 21st called the Energy Descent Action Theater, and we invite all of you to join us to find out how we can develop practical solutions to the issue of peak oil. If you haven't heard of that, you can look that up as well, and basically how to build community in smaller numbers so that we can address these issues on a very local, very practical level. Everyone needs housing, everyone needs food, everyone needs clothing. Transition Network and Transition Toronto in particular is passionate about getting this education out there. So we have a number of workshops that are going to share information about these practical skills. So thank you for allowing me to share that with everybody.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the internet now and hear some feedback from the online community. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Patrick. We have a very active discussion here online. I will try to summarize it. Online audience agrees that points that panelists make touch every individual's lives and their relationship to their surroundings, and also relates to the need of family or community events that enable us to thrive and live, not just to survive. A lot of words of affirmation of food waste, so-called waste culture, and the question is, perhaps we need legislation in the food industry that food should not be thrown out, but donated to food banks, and perhaps employees or communities should get this discounted or free. Another question is, how can we influence and reform an entrenched corporate culture that limits production of essentials and massively produces unnecessary goods? Also, the audience wonders, given the global direction and how we're all impacted by the issue, we understand that family is very important, and that the youth of today needs to be educated and aware of the resources available. So, as a community, what can we logically be able to do to collectively make change happen? Would working closely with our elected officials be a doable or feasible path? And the overall question is, what should we do?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you to the online community. Okay, so I'm going to go right into Toyin.
Okay.
It was mentioned that there's been some changes in the city. And you work with communities so much that I thought maybe you could tell us if you notice anything going on in terms of how the changes in the city, its growth, its infrastructure changes, how is this affecting our communities?
Okay, so I actually see two things. I see in certain areas the development, what most of us recognize as gentrification in certain areas, pushing certain communities out, can erase an entire history in one area. And history is a big piece of being able to have our finger on where we're going next. One of the proverbs I like is, you will always end up in the direction you are heading. And so that always, for me, on the ground is a kind of indication of almost an erase, that people, as much as they think they're starting from a great place, could easily be starting from, if I give it a term, 10 years old data or 20 years old data, that the most current, the most realistic information of evidence-based or peer review doesn't make it to the table. And so I see that gentrification. On the other end, I see communities like our community, like the one that Jacob referenced, which we have different names for, are just going back to systems that have been ancient and have been tried and tested and true, and come with a principle and an ethics that can be followed without subscribing to any commercial brand just to achieve that status. So when I see these communities just turning away from the given system, I see multiple systems rise that all work symbiotically. And so there's no need to edit me as an individual who's recognizing how much my Yoruba community and culture factors in, can work immediately with the Aboriginal community. And we have immediately with any indigenous community, because our principles and ethics are there. So on two polars, it's if you're really avoiding making hard decisions, things like that, I see the erase. I see the erase of history that makes it harder and harder and harder, generation after generation, to catch up. And if you're on the other end and you've kind of turned to a more, somebody mentioned socialist, but a more community-based system, you are relying on family, friends, and things like that. And it's just the abundance that you recognize isn't even manifested in our world right now. So as soon as you're there, there's no question about the direction you're heading. You just keep evolving. You keep having critical conversations around the table. You have more table time. There's no orphanages or old age homes. Everybody's at the table, and there's immediate value put on the people at the table, because the idea is there's no legs on the table. Everybody who sits there is holding it up, right? And so that mentality is stronger, I'm seeing, and doing better.
This, a lot of these things that you're talking about, you can't even really put a name on them.
Right.
You can't give them a title,
Right.
There's all kinds of old systems. Like on the one hand, you're saying older practices, but really a lot of the old ways that we established systems seems kind of artificial. And Bianca, I'm going to go to you with this. Somebody mentioned socialism, and is this a viable means for us transitioning into what seems to be a transition period into a new way of operating as communities, as a society? So I wanted to know from you, do you think that any of these so-called artificial systems, isms, are the way to do things, or is it something else entirely?
I believe that we can learn from other countries, other cities that are way ahead of us. Doing research, I learned that, for instance, in Germany, in Sweden, in other cities, for 15, 20 years, they've been doing something called social franchising. I think that is the glue that can bring communities together. When we talk about housing, food, transportation, products and services locally produced, it means that communities come together to live together and run a business. And that business is a co-op. And if you buy a franchise, it's not the franchises that we know of here. This is a social franchise with totally a different approach. So it is worthwhile your time to find out on your own what is out there. Just for you, I'd like somebody to put it on the camera, where Julian was talking about, and this is every community in every neighborhood is connected to other communities. the business community, the institutions, the faith groups, everybody is connected. Why? Producing the products and services needed locally. That you create businesses that are needed locally so people have a way to live and bring a revenue. Without bringing a revenue, without approaching the economics, any program is bound to fail. Because today, in 2012, we need to pay attention to the economics, the financial. And I believe that it is there already. We can learn from other communities. And housing, transportation, food, relationships, all are together if we understand that we have to find a way to connect with everybody. It's not just like I used to think, single mothers and at-risk youth in one category. It is not valid anymore. It is the elderly, the unemployed, the marginalized, the people with middle class, with high income, the businesses that are succeeding. Everybody, they are doing it in the Stanford Social Review. If you have access, Google it, and you're gonna see they are already doing these fantastic community designs, which is for the year 2012. Go to Tamarack website, they have all spelled out. It's just a matter of us knowing that it is already happening. We need to learn from it, share it with others, and go on the internet, which is the best venue to communicate.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add, because a point was made just now, which was perfect. Social, what did you call it? Social franchising. Here in Toronto, what I recognize that as is social enterprise. And like you said, there's a bunch of programs on the ground that are interconnecting. And our organization is even conceptually developing one called 10 Transitional Homes, which puts people in housing, gives them immediate employment, but they're connected to an immediate community. So it's almost like an intentional village or an intentional community sprinkled in the city to meet the urban needs of individuals who commute or get around. And all of these projects, because we're grassroots, because of most of the groups are grassroots, it takes free volunteer hours to get it from concept to ready project, and that is usually where the hit or miss is, and that's where the economic piece comes in. So I really want to echo the social enterprise piece, because that's when you say, look, come on board, work hard, it's going to meet your food needs, your shelter needs, your community needs, and collectively we can create income that goes back into the projects that we're doing. So we're essentially sustaining our activities, and our activities we love, because we can grow love. So as we do those things, and it's financial, economic, and social, once you put those three pieces together, like in our logo, we have the ecological, spiritual, and social. Once you have that, we call it the formula. And that formula is what brings people out of the isolation to a more fully animated individual to plug in a value system that has no blame, no shame, that's a safe space for them, where the individuals are committed and empathize with them enough to learn their language so they feel safe at the table. And then whatever you do as a community is a product out of the sheer fact you get together, like friends who build tree houses. So I just want to add that. I really want to echo the social enterprise piece, to Google them. The Permablitz is one of them, where we just take over backyards in urban settings. So it's out there. Very much, thank you.
Thank you, Toyin. I'm going to skip over to Julian. Sorry. You guys both mentioned, both Bianca and Toyin mentioned a few different initiatives that are already taking place. So these things are happening. They're not just here, they're happening all over the world. How is it that we can start to make these things more widespread? And once they are more widespread, to keep them sustainable? We've talked a lot about basically things that are done. But in essence, what seems to be happening is that the real change only occurs when there's a shift in values, in the way we actually think and operate and feel towards one another, towards our communities. Basically, like I said, a shift in values. So Julian, that's my question. How do we make this more widespread? And how do we make this shift in values sustainable?
Thanks, Patrick. I think that the first issue is that is that we have become so separated from each other, so completely disjointed. In fact, a person can go through their whole life just with a credit card and just paying people off and just buying services and buying favors and not have any type of connection, any type of real humane contact with someone. So these changes that are coming upon us, and we're all talking about these different styles of communities, we've got to realize that there are millions of people who have no idea how to live like this. They have been dehumanized. They're basically machines of production, and their mind works in a certain way. You put them in a situation and you tell them, right, interact, share, work, speak amongst you, get along. And although for us, maybe in this room and around this panel, it's a piece of cake, right? Or maybe not, but we may at least understand it. There are some people who have some serious issues, and I'm talking about the big majority. So we need to start thinking about education. And I spoke a little bit about this earlier on, about disseminating this new fact that we are all interconnected. But there's another layer of education. This is called integral education, where we get back to connecting with each other, to realizing that we are all interdependent, that we all need to sit down around a table, that we are all important parts of the whole. And this sounds very simple. I know it sounds very simple. However, we literally may have to go to businesses, to universities, we may have to visit communities, and we may need to start to really sit down and work with people, because it's just not simple. So this is, I think, where we start. After that, honestly, I'm not sure, but let's start with learning how to connect and work together, and then from there we can move on.
I strongly believe in this. Somebody with more experience said that to us for the last year. We need to bring the experts. We need a marketing campaign specifically for this. We are into community. We are not into marketing, but we understand that marketing works. So what we need is to find who in marketing is an expert who believes in these values, because with that experience and with our knowledge, we have it. That's all we need.
Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you, everyone. At this point, we're going to transition into you guys. Mutual responsibility, we just come here and organize an event. This event is not ours, it's yours. We want all of you to recognize this, that as Julian mentioned and a few other things that were mentioned here, we're just pieces in a puzzle. No piece can be excluded. Every piece has value. When you build a puzzle, you don't throw pieces away. You have to find a home for all of them. Every single person in this room has a valuable opinion. So when we start these discussions, I want you to remember that despite the value of your opinion, the person next to you and across from you, their opinion is just as valuable, regardless of whether you think it's correct or not. It comes from a lifetime of experience and research, and so all we need to do is start to look at these issues together and try to put all the pieces on the table and look at them and figure out how we can build this giant puzzle called humanity.
They are you, they're more than friends. Oh, look how our friends show you who I really am. Let's fall and ascend.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. My name is Mayan, and I'll be guiding the discussion tonight. A few words about myself. I'm 26, I live in Toronto, and currently looking for a job. So let's just do a very, very quick round of introductions before we actually begin with the questions. So just a few words about yourself so we get to know each other a little bit better.
So hi everybody, my name's Jerome. So this is like my second Roundtable event here in the city. So yeah, and I just recently graduated from York University a few months ago, and just got a new job like about a month ago. And yeah, so I'm just here pretty much to hear everybody's ideas and contribute my own. and I've been liking pretty much everything I've seen and heard so far. So thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Jonathan. I'm originally from Montreal, where I worked in the organic food industry for a while, both on the restaurant side and on the commercial side. I moved to Toronto to study Chinese medicine, and I now work as an acupuncturist here. So a lot of my consideration and a lot of the things I'm interested here is like how we could find balance in the way that we're living, how we could create a kind of more holistic approach to living. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Thanks.
Hey, I'm Pearl. Don't know where to start. Well, I'm a mother, grandmother of 3, and that's my first role. And I've been an entrepreneur for the last 35 years, since 79, and I'm currently trying to retire. But I'm find myself in a place in my life now where I've come through very hard times. I know what it's like to live hand to mouth, move a lot because you can't afford to stay where you are. Life's been good to me in the last 30 years or so. I've made a good life for myself. But now I have a small pot, but I'm concerned how far that's going to go. It's not really very large, and it's not going to get any bigger from now on, so I have to figure out how I'm going to live comfortably, but not run out before I run out.
Hello, I'm Orestia. I recently graduated from Ryerson University for Radio and Television Arts. And so my focus has always been, I guess, in media and communications and how we relate to each other. And my concerns and the reason why I'm here is because I have recognized that there aren't really communities here, especially in Toronto, where people can communicate and learn from one another and be able to build, these communities where there's free food and shelter and where everyone's safe and where everyone feels like they can contribute and that they all feel a part of something. And just recently, I became a part of a group called Free School, and we have free classes in the park, and we just come together and talk about all sorts of things like economics, community resilience, human rights, and it was through that I found a community in Toronto, but also with them we've come to recognize that we all need community. We all need to share our knowledge, and we all need to feel part of something, and in order to do that we have to have these sorts of, this space to do that and these group discussions and stuff. So it's great to meet everybody.
Hi, I'm Toyin Coker. I was one of the panelists today. You might have seen me on the no. So yeah, I do that. I've done a lot. This is bio. I've done a lot in terms of different skills and things like that. I have my black belt in martial arts. I'm a theater artist. I did a lot of theater and drama. I like directing, a lot of dance and choreography. The skill sets that I picked up through extracurricular is what makes the work I do possible. It's actually a meld of the fact that I'm a jack of all trades, a master of none. And then this turns out to be just one of the projects, but I've done everything from talent management to event production, all with the same principles and ethics, but wherever I was, the work shifted, very much like in community. Nice work, Wobbles. And I wanted to just say that we do a conference every year, which brings people together so they could, unconference sessions and safe space. It's called the Permaculture Living Convergence, and we do it every year. It's coming up November 17th and 18th, and it's beautifully grassroots, and it's going to stay that way. And one of the things that I really want to echo, which was mentioned in the panel, is I find that we have a lot of answers on the ground. I find that not only do we have a lot of answers on the ground, we have the ability to start executing, and I think the marketing is going to be the biggest piece. How do we get an injection of money or funding into the grassroots without compromising it, as well as avoiding granting systems altogether because of the compromise associated with grants. So that's actually the biggest piece right now, down to what the Panthers were doing, feeding 20,000 people. This is achievable and it's possible right now. You don't have to go as aggressive as the Panthers, but there's lessons to be taken from people who've really paved this path. I also want to say too that for me and for our community, this movement has been going on since humanity stepped on the face of the earth. It's not new. It didn't start with Occupy. It's just shifted and evolved as we've educated ourselves, and we've really had opportunities to make mistakes and then learn from those lessons. So I really like the trajectory the movement's going in. The scariest thing for me is the idea that it could get co-opted. So that's kind of my biggest. How do we keep moving forward with an injection of funding and a profile that doesn't compromise us? And how do we take lessons from what's existed to really avoid all that? Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Julian. Basically, this is about you. I think you heard my bio, so I'm going to cut this off short. But I'd just like to say that this is my passion in life. I'm a manager by education, and I've traveled all over the world. But as soon as I connected with mutual responsibility, it just really satisfied all those questions that I've been having about the direction that humanity is going in. So hopefully we'll be able to have a nice conversation around this table and make some connections. Thank you.
I'm Kevin Young. Actually, has worked in a financial industry more than 16 years. But I used to work with the Ministry of Health, long-term care, Ontario government, and then last year I created my own business, mining industry field. So I'm very interested. I think this topic is very thoughtful for me, and because when I worked with the government, I actually, as a financial analyst, as I mentioned, how to get the funding, from a government, how to get resources to realize our ideal dream or the ideal commodity, the community model as a problem, as a critical. I think we need to get all the stakeholders involved from the different perspectives to realize our, plan. Actually, in the government, provincial level, I have, a lot of contact, between, government, community-based, program. I used to work with smoke-free Ontario, heart and stroke, North vegetable program. All these are, community-based. I think, it's very much interesting topic. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Anatoly, and I just graduated from York University, so I'm unemployed. And I think that's kind of what drew me to here, because it kind of really hits you like, wow, like, I don't have a job. Something's wrong. Like, what's going on right now? Something has to be done. And for the 4 years that I was in university, you kind of like, you're engulfed in it, and nothing else really matters. You're studying, you have your student loan, and you don't worry about it yet. And that's kind of like later. And at some point, you realize, like, that later is now. And it's like, wow. And it hits you, and then my mom was like slightly involved in this, so I got the opportunity to find out about it. So that's why I'm here, to kind of be part of the solution, because all of us have a responsibility. We can't just keep postponing it to later and later and later. That's it.
Okay, thank you everyone. Okay, so just before we get to the questions, I would like to ask if somebody would like to take notes. We'll be able to share those later on the website, Mutual Responsibility website. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone of a few guidelines that we have. So everybody gets a chance to speak, and everyone's opinion counts. There are no right or wrong answers. And let's just keep in mind that we're trying to create a unifying atmosphere here and to really get a feel of one another. Just, step out of ourselves a little bit and listen to each other and create like a family atmosphere. So the first question is, assuming the disparity between surplus and scarcity continues to grow and the cost of basic needs keeps rising, what can we do ourselves as everyday people to improve the situation for our families and communities? So we can take a couple minutes to think about it before, unless somebody is like really eager to speak, but just, whoever is ready to speak then.
I think that if we start to pick up skills on the ground level and be able to produce the things that we identify as needs, then we don't have to worry about the prices skyrocketing. It's really just avoid it if it's nasty. So just really start to get the skills going on the ground, sharing the knowledge, parents working with youth to pass skills right on in the house, the same way we save seed to save knowledge. Human beings have the ability to maintain and use their memories like libraries, so if we start to build those skills on the ground, we don't need, sometimes we refer to it as a crutch. We have the ability to do it ourselves. We won't need to go elsewhere to find it. It's right in our communities. And we even have higher quality in our communities if we train people. That's something that I feel very much so I think that answers.
Kind of continue on the point that you were saying. I think that within our communities, and even in a bigger sense, our resources aren't being allocated right. It's strange that we could have so many subsidies for corn crops and soy crops, which all go to waste, and they're to maintain an industry that's ultimately destroying our planet with monocultures and a completely unsustainable model. And the same thing is true in the community, where huge subsidies are going to businesses to build condos, to create private corporations. These need to be going into communities, and we need to kind of rethink our whole way of understanding communities, I think, or understanding the way the world works. We're on such a kind of linear model right now, Let's move forward, let's progress. Things are going to get better. But it's like we already know the way the world works, and it doesn't work in a linear sense. It works in a circular sense, closed model. So it's really interesting that we have somebody here from the gardening movement, because that's what organic gardening is all about, creating this closed system, creating something where the waste from one area becomes, the benefit of another area. There's no waste, and yet we're working in a model that's completely unsustainable because all it does is produce waste, and that's really unfortunate. But we got to figure out a way to get around that. And I think I'm not hopeless. I think that we're going to eventually move in the right direction. It's hard to map your own progress.
I guess we're going to build a continuous thread somehow here. I've just recently moved from my house, so one of the things I'm going to miss is the gardening that I was doing, growing some of my own food during the growable season that we have in Toronto. But I'm fortunate that I have a decent-sized balcony on my apartment now. So guess what? It looks like a garden. So I've been growing tomatoes and herbs and all that stuff along with my flowers. I think that's one thing that we can do, but I think the gardening is really a big issue, but it's really not the main issue. I think that one of the main issues is we need to look at what is it we really need here in this world. I look around and I have so much. Do I need everything? Well, I have it, so I've got it. But I think especially for young people, starting out, you can look at how much you really need to accumulate in this world. Like, we're just being seduced all day long by media of all the stuff that we have to have. Do we really have to have it? No, we don't have to have most of it. We can see that we can really live quite comfortably with much less. Another way that we can do that is, I know on my son's street they already started it. They bought one machine for 4 houses to cut the grass. one machine because they all have huge properties. And so, I mean, even in a better neighborhood, they're already looking at every house doesn't need to have a snow blower. 6 houses can share one snow blower. And there are other systems in place. I know that there was one system that was started about 25 or 30 years ago. It didn't really work too well then, about sharing services and skills that you have. Some of them worked on points, some of them just worked on hours or whatever, but I don't think humanity was desperate enough for it to work then. But I think now that that's something we should relook at, about how we can share resources and stuff. And it's not all about whether you can afford it or not. If you need it, you need it. And if there's something that you need, you can have it. And, that's how it needs to work. I think we need to be building a community in our home, because some homes aren't even a community. So we have to start in our house, in our home, if you're lucky to have people with you, and start on your street, and then even neighborhoods. These are where it starts, but really we live in one global community now. So how do we look at how this could be a real global community?
Like you started off just by mentioning about gardening not necessarily being one of the bigger issues. I don't think it might be a big issue in the sense of feeding the population, but I think what it does more than that is provide an example of exactly what you're just saying, of a way that we could kind of take this thing, people growing up thinking that fruit and vegetable, or meat for that matter, comes from the supermarket. It doesn't come from the supermarket, it comes from the soil or, wherever, a pasture. So it's just a great way to teach people how to live off their own means, how to not just be consumers, but be active in their own, survival, whatever, necessities in their life. Absolutely.
One of the things that we explore with permaculture is, because we go into different communities, you hear conversations around, like privilege or dismantling racism in the institution and all these different things. And what I find, the communities with privilege are really the communities that, we were focusing our conversation towards in the beginning, because the buffer that privilege gave meant that the brunt of the severity of the situation wouldn't hit certain communities as fast as it would hit other communities. And communities that are marginalized, communities of color, communities in areas that have been hit with large environmental disasters or things like that, all fully understand how to share resources, how to take care of each other, and how to kind of propel the community piece forward. What I find is that the influence of the affluence is too hard to get away from when you don't have that voice. And it's actually something, when you work in many different groups, Awakening the Dreamer, Pachamama Alliance, the permaculture movement, the Back to the Land movement, it's always about getting the conversation transparent enough that everybody at the table, no matter their background, their privilege, or their point of view, can understand it on a fundamental level of that empathetic, this is what my neighbor is dealing with, and this is how they're dealing with it. Because often I find we go into communities and we try to educate them on things they've known for years, they've been trying to change for years, but we don't want to hear it in the way they say it. We want them to first say it back, that we understand it before we offer help or aid. And that's one of the pieces when we talk about the no blame, no shame, is appreciating and valuing communities for the information and the knowledge that they have outright. And I think systematically, what our community encourages is the dissemination of other people's arguments based on, if they didn't hit a popular thread, if they didn't say the right thing, but there is the constant need to interject a more academic approach to conversation that does not satisfy the actual intent of the conversation. It just kind of brings it onto somebody else's playing field. And I think if we are to start addressing the fact that our prices in our supermarkets are skyrocketing and that they're already too high in most other communities, that individuals on ODSP can't afford rent or food at particular times of the month, if we start to bring these conversations into a more high-profile community or into a more high-profile arena, as in to give it a better platform and have a diverse amount of people speaking on the same issues through their own tongue, how they normally speak, I think we're going to find that the synergizing, the unifying has already happened. It's already started. We don't see it because of how much we're in it, but when you zoom out, the networks are already connecting, and they're actually just stone cold blocking out the oversaturated high prices. They are now baking their own granola. They're doing things, but it's on local levels. And so I think more of that. I think more of getting that message out there, more of legitimizing traditional approaches to things, not going back to the Arc Ages, but recognizing that there was a system that wasn't broken, we just didn't recognize it. And how do we start to, not necessarily even say, although saying sorry is a big piece, but that's not the focus, is getting past and implementing. How do we implement local, real-time, modern, old values?
I want to echo what Toyin just said about going to the dark ages. Like everybody's like, nothing's working. We got to garden everything. We got to start growing this. We got to go back to carts and horses and stuff like that. But we cannot go back. Basically, we have everything we need: technology, transportation, knowledge, the internet. We have everything. We actually have everything we need to make that change. But why aren't we making it? Now that's the question. Now, if today we came up with a machine that could eliminate or eradicate hunger immediately, from one day to the other, that machine would probably get put away somewhere in a dark dungeon somewhere, because you know what? It's not the machine, it's not the technology that we're lacking, it's the attitude, the common attitude. And I want to echo what Jonathan said. It's about this linear model. We are in a paradigm that's unsustainable. People are starting to wake up, right? But you still have this general consensus that volatility is good, that price rises are good, that speculation is good, and if there's a drought somewhere, then we'll hike our prices up. And it's all this corporate attitude. Why? Because the thing is that we still haven't realized that we are round, that in fact we're interdependent, just like nature. And nature works, right? Nature regulates itself, and it always looks for balance. Nature always looks for homeostasis. But humanity is linear. Now, what happens is that we have two ways of basically coming out of this. The first one is through pain and through blows, and the other one is to come out of this consciously by doing what we're doing today. Now, just to answer the question, I think that personally, what I can do is try to change bring about this change from inside out. We always want to change the other. We always want to change that corporation. We always want to change that country, that government. And what does this do? It just polarizes us, right? And then we're back to the same old political games. You're left, I'm right, he's up, she's down. Guys, it's so old school. It's so over. I mean, although the media still tries to push it on us, right? But it's over. I think we're coming to the center now. We're coming to roundtables. We're coming to this unity, this circle. And in this circle is where the solution is. We have many differences, but if we can connect above those differences, then that's where the solutions are. So what can I do is basically be part of movements like this. I can't do anything on my own. What am I going to do, start running around on the street like a madman? Like honestly. So what I do is I look for people like Jonathan, like Jerome, like Joanne, and people who are moving in the same direction. And there are tons and tons of groups who are doing this. And it seems like, she's a little bit there, she's a little bit here, but it doesn't matter because the direction, it's the same. And we need strength in our connection. So this is my point. I connect with mutual responsibility. I join people who are basically have the same idea as me, like-minded people. And together as a community, then we have strength. And this is how we start making the change from inside out, as it were.
I think, Chris.
Okay, everybody, just so you know, at this point we're at about the halfway point. So if you haven't already moved on to the second question, or if you're really deep into the first question, cool, stick with the first question. Just wanted to let you know, keep you abreast of where we're at for time. So we got about another half hour. With 5 minutes left, I'm gonna let you guys know, and you guys can go around the table and kind of summarize what kind of things you came up with. So carry on.
I have worked in a finance industry. Of course, maybe from finance perspective, this world is driven by money, right? Just all we're talking about food inflation, talking about financial crisis, unemployment rate, okay? But all central banks are printing money, right? U.S., Asian, and European countries. Of course, this is I think the fundamental reason that caused the food inflation, right? Of course, printing money and basic metals and crude oil are skyrocketing, right? Because the oil is the all coming food coming from oil, right? That's the fundamental reason why the food, the price are going to be higher maybe the next in the coming 3 or 4 years. I think, but as Julie mentioned, we are all independent individual. We can do our style. We have backyard, right? We have land. We have resources, right? We have potash in Canada, right? Very cheap. So you can do yourself. You plant yourself. Just for your health. Actually, from the housing perspective, you just practice and let your children know what is this potato, this tomato, how to grow up in your backyard. I think it's a very easy way to fight with financial crisis, fight with food inflation. I think it's a practical way.
I really like that idea. One of the things that I wanted to ask or even put out there, though, is the realization that, okay, so you're growing food in your backyard, and there is a collapse, and your neighbor scales your fence to come get it because they don't have food in their backyard. So what I'm actually bringing up is that there are the cause and effect, the actual root doesn't get solved with that, but yes, definitely a piece. And front yards as well, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, totally. Front yard and do things that, if we're, and also to answer this question directly, what can be done, as soon as the Occupy movement started, I was in New York, unfortunately, swallowed in the middle of it, standing there going, what's up? And then when I came to Toronto, I was immediately called to do teach-ins by the Native community based on the idea of we need to occupy ourselves. How can we be occupying, once again, land in this way without the knowledge? How, and like Julian's saying, turning it inwards. If we start to occupy ourselves, these principles govern us. Like, we're part of nature. We can't escape it. So I really like the idea of just turning it inward and allowing that inertia and allowing that natural energy so that we actually just jump on board. And the idea within permaculture is that you utilize energy systems that already exist instead of going against them. So if there's something that kind of a roller coaster beside, jump on it instead of going in the opposite direction and trying to go against the grain. And what we've done is we've convinced ourselves that our current system is in line and that it is part of the system. It is part of the natural system. And we're only now just coming to terms with how wrong and incorrect that was and on how many levels it is. And all those variables, all those different levels are educational points, are points to our opportunities for education. Like Julian said, inviting everybody to the table because everybody is a part of that. Everybody's a consumer in some way, right? And so I like the idea of really turning it inwards, occupying ourselves. And what does that look like? Taking workshops that teach us other languages, whether they're hard or soft skills, relationship of planting a seed in the soil. You develop a language with the ground. Working with youth with learning disabilities and offering them different opportunities in your companies or something you're doing, engaging in your community, or even just stopping and talking to that elderly person who walks down the street. All these things that we've heard continuously over I remember The More You Know used to do all these spots, the TV show. All of those things combined is an action to start moving things forward, and then just connecting with local grassroots groups like Transition Toronto, Permaculture Project, Occupy, and then finding out they're all one community, right? So I think, we have a lot of self-education to do.
So we talked a lot about kind of ways we can deal with the problem, and I think I agree with the fact that there are very many ways we can do this, but to solve the problem, I think it's really fundamental. We all touched upon this, but our values, we kind of develop them over a long period of time. So it's like really, really deep rooted in us. And the greed, and for us to be like only care about profits, that's really, really deeply rooted in us. At least I think. And I think it's like our ego. So it's a matter of like changing that from like deep, deep, deep down. And it really hit me. We talked about it up, the panel did, how we have to spend more time with our family. And I think the best way to have like a long-term, like a really fundamental change is to teach our kids. And it's much more difficult for us to change the way we see things, because we've done this and we're integrated into this culture, and we just see things the way they are. And it's good that we're questioning things now, but it's really hard to change that about ourselves. Now, for kids that are much more malleable, they have the world is basically, if we can have a huge influence on them, positive or negative, and that's the perfect opportunity, I think, to bestow the good types of values that we're trying to advocate for here. And if we have an opportunity to spend more time with our families, with our kids, brothers, sisters, whoever, as long as we start off early, I think that's when we're going to make the biggest, most fundamental.
So since we're talking about working at the grassroots level, stuff like that, how to work towards our basic needs. So Kevin, you mentioned how this is all just about money. So I found that interesting because that's the first thing that came into my mind when she asked the question. So I'm thinking maybe if you really come to think about it, what the way money is used since ever, it's basically just an entitlement. It's an entitlement to basic needs. In the world that we live in right now, it's like if you don't have the money, it's basically you don't have the right to live, you don't have the right to food, shelter, everything that you need, or basic needs. So, I mean, what does that really say about us? I mean, what happened to the good old-fashioned just give and take? Because, I mean, the President of the United States have just as much right to this needs as the next homeless man on the street is taking. So that's really like the core, I think, of what the problem is. So, I mean, we're human beings, for God's sakes. We're the salt of the earth. I mean, it's ours. It's everybody's. So nobody has it. So money doesn't really mean anything to me, to be quite blunt. I don't mean to offend anyone, but it's just, I think that really is the problem. So, I know it's a very radical idea. I mean, a lot of people will cringe upon that thought. That how do we get rid of money? But it's just, if you really come to think about it, it's an illusion. It's not really. We don't really need it. I mean, you just have to kind of, like, we're talking about, like working from the inside out. Like, it's all part of it. Like, if you do that, I sincerely think with a complete, honest kind of, it's just self-awareness or thinking, you will arrive at that conclusion that it's all about just watching out for each other. We talk about resources and we have it. It's not really scarce as much as people think. But it's just, just lending a hand to a neighbor. It's just good old-fashioned give and take. It has nothing to do with money, really. So,
But the first comment I want to really make is I'm sitting here, I'm the grandma at this table. And it just, I can't tell you how good it makes my heart feel to sit here with so many young people. You're all, most of you, quite young. To think that this is the next generation growing up that will mold the world. I don't know, I think a few years back I was wondering if we're going to have a world past my lifetime. But it gives me great hope for humanity. And another thing that crossed my mind was, I don't quite know how to say it without sounding... We have so many crises that we're dealing with right now in the world. Economic crises, we've had tsunamis, we've had great towers in New York blown away, and just when that happened that day, that just rocked my boat, I'll tell you. Because I was working for world peace, and what the heck am I doing? However, the Chinese symbol, the yin-yang, not the yin-yang, but the Chinese symbol for crisis is opportunity. And from that tsunami, and from when the Twin Towers came down in New York, there was such an expression of community and humanity reaching out to help each other. Not just even the family helping the family, but the whole city helping the city, and people all over the world thinking about it and supporting them in whatever ways they could. Firemen came all the way from Toronto to help. This is community, and so why do we need to wait for these pains to come for us to start being who we are, who we were born to be here, to be our brother's keepers. And so thank you for waking up so young.
So it's interesting that you talk about the how chaos and opportunity are like the same but upside down. And because I think it's funny how in our culture we seem to make like conflict into like a bad thing, when really we learn so much from conflict, and we have to really, have space where it's like okay to voice our conflict and to be like, okay, we made mistakes, and then to recognize that and to work together and to to work to build from that something better. And we mentioned a lot of stuff from like starting from within yourself and then moving outwards, and like you have in order to build community you have to start from your own self-determination, your own knowledge. And when we talk about economics, the original meaning of economics actually means like the organizing of your household. And we've totally lost touch with that, where, like kids these days don't understand the value of what hard work is. They don't recognize how much that what their parents and their parents and like that, building of, work into communities, what that value is. And we've manipulated it and made it artificial and really took what our values out into the world so we can't grasp it. So it's no longer, within, it's all out there, and we feel like we can't reach it. It's almost impossible, and we don't have the community to talk to people and be like, hey, like this doesn't feel right, and someone to agree with you, and to have that like soundboard to really discuss and to learn from each other. So I really like how we talk about like it starts from you and then to go,
One of the things I wanted to add real quick, and I know I'm taking a lot of time on the mic, please just, talking stick me, is that there's a lot of generalization around our culture, and I just wanted to point out that this is not the hour of everybody, right? This Western culture is actually very artificial to a lot of people, and I think the language itself of speaking it into this existence that's so huge is one of the things that we should start changing, because the reality for majority of people around the world, this is not sane to them. This is actually quite insane. More traditional communities understand the need of culture, and I mentioned earlier in our Yoruba community, it's insane to have an old age home. It's insane to have an orphanage. That is the very essence, the reason a community exists. And it's another, the knowledge of how children can infect spirit and energy into the elders is known in most traditional communities. As you mentioned, your mom brought you here. Intergenerational ways of doing things is the only way we passed down knowledge before, but it was the fact that these cultures that had these values, whether they've been suppressed or oppressed or just forgotten or, maybe translated into a language where it lost a lot of its meaning, whatever has happened, we've lost this understanding that our neighbors, even if they're a village away and we've never met them, are operating by a fundamental principle and ethics that has to do with humanity. So we can know outside that people do think the way I do without knowing them. We don't need social media to know that our neighbor cares about their children. That should be something that we have in our principles, in our guiding. And then the other things, like coming to market or trading or exploring, being nomadic, those are when you start to step out of your comfort zones, right? And in traditional communities, you leave your door open. Somebody shows up, you have to feed them. It's actually written in. It's a lot of ways that people were, kind of taken over because that was abused. But as we come into these knowledges, as we come into these things, like I said, it's not so much about making people feel shame for their ancestors doing that. It's about moving forward. Cool. We have traditional communities that are still using this knowledge. And a woman from the Aboriginal community stood up. We live on Turtle Island. How many of us have visited a native reserve and spoken to a chief? How many people have gone into a traditional community and said, I really like this? How does that relate to my culture? Where's my culture? If I don't have one and I have to adopt Western culture as an African American, that's going to cause me some problems. I have a culture I come from. How can an African youth connect with an African culture, and how does that culture have a thread to all other cultures? Right? How do we start to rebuild those channels when we focus on self, we're actually empowering self, and we empower the youth in a language that not only their spirit and their minds understand, but that their environment can respond to? Because we have, we're starting to get into conversation about the fact we're all divine individuals. We all have purpose. We all have destinies. And our cultures, especially our ancient ones, already addressed how to start handing these knowledges down. We even have rites of passages in traditional communities. How do we start to bring those back? And how do we get out of compromise so that we can start to share a table more? So we don't have to go to work when the roundtable is happening. So our children having childcare is not an issue to come and participate in a project where there's not a whole bunch of bureaucrats at the back of the room saying, shush that child, oh, I can't. How do we start to create safe space for everybody and not just myself, right? Where's my, right? And yeah, he's exactly right. And see, even just that, his name means through this we enjoy. Every time he comes to a meeting, everybody starts laughing or enjoying and things like that. People often forget that he doesn't need to contribute to the meeting. Having him in the space is valuable. And having a single mother outside the door because her child is going to cry, it's pain. And that's where we start to break down those ties that bind, and we start to offer a stigma to people outside of and our isn't even a majority. It's our thinking that everybody thinks the way I do. No. How do we start to get into a more empathetic approach and say, how do you speak? Okay, let me go do my research. I'll come back and meet you at the table then. Taking our time, slowing things down, and really getting to know each other.
So I think it's time to go to the second question. It's actually, no. I was gonna say that it's very much connected to the first one. So you guys can still, stay in that mindset when answering. But the question is, when communities and families combine efforts towards helping each other, they can create systems of mutual aid. If you had full support of your local community members, what systems of mutual aid would you suggest? And what will it take to make them sustainable? So it's not just to make things happen, it's actually to make those systems last. So that is really the question. Like, what do you guys suggest in that sense? Like, not just to throw an idea out there, but rather to really sustain it, like as a system that will work for everybody.
I just want to jump in here because I really felt something coming up within me when you said, how do you make things last? You make things last because you like them, because you start finding value in them. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when they start relating to each other in a different way, not in the typical consumer way, they start to realize that they forgot about a sense of togetherness. They start to get a feeling like, I like it here, I like the people here. And this is pleasurable. This is joyful. This is natural. Now, we are typically lacking something. We're always going and buying some product, or we want another car, or we want another house, and we're always on the search for that happy pill, right? That ultimate objective that's going to make us completely happy. But it never does happen. But what we're finding that there's value in connection. Now, as soon as we start this process of building better communities and more real communities, then we're going to start finding that we forgot about that. And people are going to start getting excited again about being together, about sharing, about working together. And work is not going to be getting up in the morning and sort of dragging your feet out onto the motorway and what have you. It's going to be working in community with other women and men, and you're going to be able to identify with them. And I honestly think that how do we make it last? It's going to be a natural process. It's not going to be some artificial thing that we're going to say, no, we have to rigidly have this system, like political systems that have been tried to be coerced on people. This has to be non-coercive. It has to be natural and accepted by us all and liked. So this is something that kind of came up in me as soon as I heard the question.
Just to say one thing, I mean, when you were talking just now, it just made me think of something that really stuck with me from university. I can't remember who said it, but it's about thinking of people in terms of them being ends to themselves rather than just means to an end. So often in life when we interact with people, we're thinking, how do they benefit me? That's not how the world works. I mean, everybody, well, maybe that's the issue that it is now. We need to start thinking about people in terms of they're just important as me, and when I'm interacting with any of you, I need to be just as equally aware of your needs and your background and who you are as much as mine. So how we start to do that, interestingly enough, is, as we've been saying all this time, is we've got to start with ourselves. We've got to start looking inward, find out why we think those ways, and challenge them. I like the way you put that. Yeah.
I think we all have to begin to realize that I am a part of you and you are a part of me. And so if I inflict pain on you, I'm inflicting pain on myself. I don't want pain, so, so if I really want to be treated, if I want to feel good, I don't think it should just come from the selfish feeling of doing things only for your own pleasure, but really start to understand that the world, like everything that's happening in the world, whether it be economic, environmental, food shortages, oil shortages, we're all sharing all of that. Why don't we share the prosperities that we also have? So, we have to balance that. We're all ready to say, oh yeah, we share all those pains. But really, do we share our prosperities?
Continue a little bit with what you're saying. I think it's a great thought because I notice it in practice all the time. When I give, I tend to receive just as equally, very quickly. Life tends to balance out that way. So when you're aware of it, yeah. So in trying to better our own lot, the best thing we could do is try and better the people around us and just have it paid forward.
I want to throw in an analogy that most of you probably heard about, but we tend to think of ourselves as individual cells, but we can't see the big picture. And we take it from nature that cells that work for their own self-benefit, this is what we call cancer. And that cancerous tumor, it makes the whole body feel bad. Now, a healthy system is when all the cells work only for their needs, let's say, and all the rest of the energy, they put it into the good of the whole. And that's how we create a healthy and prosperous body. But we need to make the mind switch. We need to make that shift, that upgrade. And it's all here and here.
Again, just because I don't know. Obviously, I come from Chinese medicine background now. This is what I practice, and a lot of that's about holism. So when you're saying that we look at ourselves as individuals, another great analogy that I've kind of seen in the past is like we think of ourselves as fingers. But when you take a step back, you realize it's all part of the same hand. You and I and all of us here, we're definitely individuals. We're, wholes unto ourselves, but we exist within a greater whole. So the way I live my life, the way that I make my choices, it affects you in a very real sense, And I think oftentimes the idea of holistic is completely misunderstood or misinterpreted, or people don't want to admit it. But it's like everything is connected, If I decide to, abandon a a good cause and instead just look at myself selfishly, that energy goes out into the world, and there's more likely that people are going to follow it. If we start setting positive examples and creating a more positive reality, then that energy goes out into the universe and it'll reciprocate. So, sorry.
I just actually wanted to throw in the old do unto others as you wish to be done by adage, and also that in permaculture, care of people, care of the land, and return of the surplus back to the people in the land is kind of like the law. And if you have surplus, even if it's one extra tomato, there's somebody who needs it. And the idea of always looking to the surplus to make sure that you're offloading it, because if you think of it like debt, and you carry that around and it's negative, it's actually creating that vacuum effect of negative. And so that idea of scarcity or hoarding also comes from that. Same with the patent mentality of holding on to things, right? And all
Okay,
these different...
sorry, really sorry to interrupt these discussions. Looks like everybody's really getting pretty deep into it. That's outstanding. So at this point, why don't you guys use your moderators to go over some of the impressions that you wrote down and just kind of summarize where you're at. After this, we're going to change things up a little bit and start sharing everything with each other. Okay? So in about 5 minutes, we'll get to that. So just summarize things for now. Thanks.
Toyin, do you want to maybe finish your point? I mean, I think that's...
I appreciate that. Yeah, just that, I really see that on the ground level, because we have these ideals, because we have even these catchphrases and sayings, that because we're so disconnected from realities that other people are facing, the sayings also need to be interpreted for our economic or social place where we're at, so that the language actually hits us on a level that brings us back to the whole. A lot of people still interpret for where they are, and they still interpret pain for how they feel pain, and they still interpret things, you gave the reference of the hand. It's one thing to say, cool, I'm part of a hand and I'm just a finger on it, but it's also another part to say, I'm part of a hand that together, or with my knowledge or without it, it's acting. It's important for me to be conscious of all the fibers, the muscles, the skin cells, all the pieces of that whole in order to be a functioning piece of it. It's the idea of being the informed consumer or just knowledgeable, continuously on that pursuit of knowledge. If we recognize that our tendons can snap and make us a weaker component to the hand, we can start to take these metaphors into our daily life and say, cool, I've reached this point. I ride my bike, I eat fair trade, I shop local. Now that I'm at this point, where do I go next? Instead of stopping, instead of that stasis where we're continuously pushing ourselves to achieve that next height, right? So that we just don't get comfortable. Comfort now in our permaculture community sometimes equals lazy. Not in an attack anyway to what you mentioned earlier about being comfort. But the idea of being comfortable for one person is so different for other individuals that merely basing it on our perspective is part of an issue, right? Is really getting out there and saying, what is comfortable for this community? How can my actions here allow this community to achieve what they want there without me going over there and interfering? I don't need to come and teach them a thing. I just need to see what I'm doing here that affects somebody else on the other side. Butterfly effect, right? That ripple effect of my small energy can have a huge positive or a huge negative tsunami somewhere else. How much can I dedicate myself to learning where that ripple will lie, right? And so that we can even say, I can foreshadow that if I buy fair trade now, this entire co-op will now be fair trade, because I can recognize that I can go out and start to create that just from showing my fair trade, talking openly about it, recognizing there's no shame in it, and kind of being my own marketing team for this lifestyle, or this livity, which Patrick said livity, but livity, and how do I create this as a way of life for me so that people can see me walking around confident, I'm rocking this, and then all of a sudden it's a fad. All of a sudden people just want to drink fair trade, they don't even know. But that takes them, it's like a domino effect. Once you start, you can't stop this knowledge wheel, right? So just to keep pushing it. And once you're comfortable being like, oh, gotta break that glass ceiling, because there should not be comfort, right? We should continuously be striving to push the envelope further and further and further, because there are groups that have gotten much further than where we are now who crumbled under the weight of this this system. They crumble. They reached heights bigger than we've ever seen right now in this movement, and they crumbled. Right? David Suzuki rejected his Alternative Peace Prize and said, Toronto is not where it should be for this day and age, for our privilege, for our economic, social background, for our privilege. Threw it back. You know, so I think we need to just keep pushing. Maybe we all need to go minimal, you know, just keep pushing. Thank you for letting me finish.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. So I think we pretty much realized that we're really interdependent and interconnected, and I guess really the only way for us to make anything last would be to keep going in that system that, you know, where everybody is able to put in their own thing, and then you see how much, if you come out of yourself just a little bit, to really listen to each other. And even what I just witnessed here, I mean, it's in the last event as well, it was really amazing. So I feel it really is like it really connects us all together.
We're going to wrap things up at the tables right now. I'm sorry again. So basically, at this point, you guys have all shared all kinds of things. I'm sure that the experience was very unique and very different. And at this point, we're gonna start to share some of these impressions we got with everyone. Not what we said. I don't want you guys to read us the notes. I want to talk about the way we felt. Everybody who's here has some kind of a need for a new society, a different way of doing things, a new culture. And we want to try to inspire the desire in others for this new initiative that we're taking. So I just want to hear about how you guys felt about this whole thing, and talk to each other. So Ernest is going to come around with a microphone right here, and he's going to run around and talk to anybody who wants to give us some impressions. So anybody like to speak right now? Toyin, let's give it to Toyin. She'll break the ice.
Yeah.
Stand up for us, Toyin. And if you want to share your name, guys, like this is your home right now, guys. Honestly, be comfortable.
Hey, family. My name is Toyin Coker again. I wanted to share that one of the impressions maybe our table came up with is there are active projects and things we can be doing right now. In fact, there's an abundance of information and things to apply. It's really just connecting with self, being in right relationship with self, the idea we mentioned of occupying ourselves, so that we can start from our own perspective and our own lens, start to really hear the languages of the communities around us to amplify everybody's voice and start to bring everybody up. Also just basically around workshops, connecting with our local leaders, community members, and groups that don't necessarily have large brands or names that we've been taught to recognize and we've been taught to feel, you know, are credited because they have a brand, and really connecting with individuals on a grassroots level to legitimize not only the fact that they exist, but to give them the experience on the ground of working with community and developing their own projects, their own conversations, and their own skill sets on the ground to start to put value back into community. One of the other things that I wanted to share, which was just around the idea that we could start to visualize the world that we want to live in and just walk around in a confidence that it will exist and that it does exist, and to start putting to rest the ideas that everybody thinks this way, or this is what we're all doing and this is the world we live in, when the reality is, to majority of the people I know, they would just shake their heads at that. That's not my world. I have no idea what that means. I don't know why you keep putting it out there and making it real and real and real. If we start to dismantle the lies we tell ourselves, we can start to just see the realities around us. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Toy. Okay, I want to hear how you felt. Tell us how you felt about the way this went, this initiative.
My name is Anatoly. It was really cool. It was inspiring to see people from so many different backgrounds. Like we have people in the financial sector, acupuncture, radio, video, all people, all ages, from all walks of life, all places, to kind of be able to come together under like one goal. So it was really like inspiring. It was really surprising and cool to see something like this happen. It was nice.
Thanks, Anatoly. Anybody else? This guy.
Hi, my name is Michael. I feel like we're like a one family. Thank you.
Thank you.
I felt that there were a number of issues that a lot of people have been discussing, and one of the important things is that one of the most predominant discussions that I keep hearing from all the tables is need to develop a sense of community with respect for individuals. And looking at all the different types of people that are at this table, making discussions about the same topics from different age groups, I recognize that everybody has the same concerns, and they're all concerned, and they're all talking about it. And that gives me hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I felt like this was a great discussion to have. It was really nice to sit with this group of people, again, diverse group of people who had, things to share from their hearts, and I could see that everyone really cares, and that was like the most important thing. No matter what you have to say, they all care, and they want to see a positive change, and so I wish us all the best of luck.
Hello, family. I like this. This is beautiful. My name is Veronica, and I'm very happy to be here. This is wonderful programming. Thank you so much. Gorgeous. And I'm feeling really inspired, but so much so like we are at that tipping point. And it's about taking this atmosphere that we feel and then going out and sharing it with those that we meet on the street, not just our friends and family, but the human family, this concept that we're playing with right now of what is family and what unites us, and the human rights that we all deserve and are inherent, but are not yet fulfilled. We can stand up and speak up, and through a human rights framework, we can really start to get food and shelter and clothing and love to everyone. Because it's not yet fulfilled, not even here. And that's something that I'm really inspired to tell you, so hopefully you can start to bring that vocabulary into your community and the people on the street.
Feelings, okay, nothing more than feelings, yeah. So anyway, I guess what I felt most was that there seems to be some discontent in the world today, but not everyone is feeling a lack of resources and the things of life, the basic needs to be a human, and that the idea was that people who are in need tend to come together, and when people have everything, then they tend to be relatively independent. So this is the dichotomy that we're finding, and that's how we're ending up with discussions like this. And it's very good that people are getting together whether or not they need, because when you actually have a surplus, then what better place to put it than into people who actually have needs, which is kind of a balancing act, right? That's so it just felt good that people feel about it both ways. It's not like it's some kind of charity thing. It's just people need, if you have too much, why waste it?
Feeling a mutual responsibility, I
Right.
guess. Eh?
It's a social responsibility, really, isn't it? Right? Yeah. And that's basically the feeling that I'm getting from the.
Thank you, thank you. What's your name? What's your name?
I'm Fred.
I am Toby, and my feeling is that one of the core issues that we're all facing and that we all feel within our groups is that there's less communication in the world, and we're here communicating and sharing our thoughts, and that's very important this day and age. Yeah.
Thanks, Toby.
Hi, I'm Alex from Richmond Hill, Ontario. So very brief, feeling of the family, and despite of sometimes completely opposite opinions, we felt very warm and relaxing atmosphere, environment, and conclusion, we felt like we can feel we can solve any problem.
Yes. Okay, so at this point we're going to move a little faster. Let's share with each other 1 and 2 word impressions. You know, I remember Jamie was at our last event. The first thing he got up and he said he felt patience. It's always stuck with me. So we call this little part, we call it popcorn. Is we pop around the room and quickly get 1 word impressions from everybody. All right here.
Hopeful.
Connection.
Real.
Common sense.
The future. Thoughtfulness.
Love.
Mutual responsibility.
Just to add, this was the summary of our first question, if you can see. Somebody just drew this during the first question, and that was the summary of our first question.
Active listening.
Connect.
Pen.
I want to add to love, applied love.
It's doable.
Equality.
Like-minded.
Food.
Kindness.
Give.
Believe.
Already happening.
All right. Okay, guys, that's gonna basically do it. Thank you, everybody, and look around the room. This is the beginning of something. You guys, it's such a wonderful thing to see people coming out, trying to just do something. We see it's pretty obvious that there's issues, there's problems, and that you're here is the biggest and most important thing. So thank you very much.
I can't do this on my own. I'm only flesh and bone, but I have moments of the truth, and so do you. You are your friends, they are you. They're more than friends. Oh, look how your friends show you.